What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Mets Central podcast. This is Mets Central podcast episode 46, and in today's episode, we're gonna be talking about the most recent series that passed by, where the New York Mets have swept the Toronto Blue Jays in a close but exciting three-game series. Obviously, you know, you guys probably saw a bunch of our post games that we did where we covered the series. Two of them from the car, one of them from our house because Evan went to the game on Saturday. I didn't because I had to work. I have to do my responsibilities here. But it's all right. I got to see two wins, both on Friday and on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, just great to be back in the ballpark. I mean, Steve Cohen talked about before the season started that he really wants to see the fans show up today or this season. And the Mets sold out. They didn't sell out every game, but the Friday home opener game was a sellout. And I think that because I saw on a post on X that they sold like 121,000 tickets, and that's how many people showed up. So great to see. I mean, it's well deserved because the team's good. Obviously everyone wants to see Juan Soto play in right field, and it was just really nice to go to City Field and see all those Juan Soto jerseys, in the stands and on the concourse. But yeah, a sweep and now a huge three-game set coming up against the Miami Marlins, where the Mets could potentially look to sweep back-to-back series on the first homestand of the season. So, Evan, how are we feeling?
Feeling great. It was like you said, great to be finally back at the stadium. I was there for all three games. Game two, even though you were working, it was a bit cold. Worth it in the end because I got the win, but it was freezing that game. But yeah, like every single game honestly felt like a playoff game with the crowd. I would say the third game was definitely the weaker of the crowds, but still, it was like more than at points from last season because we went to some games over the summer against like the A's, the Red Sox, and those were some big games down the stretch, even though they were AL opponents. And I thought that those games had quieter crowds versus early April crowds, which is very impressive, and hopefully that will continue. Probably not as much this homestand just because it's a weekday. But it's really great to be there. And like you said, seeing Juan Soto in person, Met fans doing the illegal thing, chanting Juan Soto's name. But nice to get a sweep. Let's hope they could sweep the homestand now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, it's what we just talked about before. I mean, obviously for this upcoming series, we're gonna be at City Field for two of the three games. But I mean, really the Friday game, it was just really electric to be back there. Obviously, with Howie Rose and everything, doing the player introductions, hearing Francisco Lindor being introduced with the MVP chants, of course, all the fans singing "My Girls" and this singing "My Girl" when he came up to at bat. I mean, every single at bat too, which is just insane. And to think about just how much electric and the vibes were at City Field. But then hearing Juan Soto, obviously, Pete, who had a very big homestand, was quiet a bit in the second game, but really the first game, he really got kicked off with the two-run home run on the first inning. But I think the big thing, to really take from game one is the pitching, and the pitching really continues to be excellent. And that really starts off with Tyler McGill, because we talked about it on the post game, coming back from City Field after the home opener. But Tyler McGill has kind of got us believing him again, and it's a good feeling.
Yeah, I honestly, I hate to say I fully believe because we said it during the post game, and I still stand by it. If he was just able to get through that sixth inning without any damage, then I think every single person would have been talking about Tyler McGill very differently than we are right now. But I mean, either way, people still are, I think, a lot higher on him versus what it has been because I've been talking about it nonstop. The slider just getting a lot more vertical break on it, which is helping him generate a lot more swing and misses. I mean, you saw it with the slider, how he had the most whiffs out of any pitch that he threw on Friday during the home opener. The four seam continuing to sit in the high 90s, which he was honestly getting it a little bit up there. I felt like, and it felt like just a general this series. A lot more of the pitchers were finding their velo, which makes sense because we're starting to get through the season a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he was just cruising through most of this outing, and it was just nice. Like, it was really nice because a lot of fans, I think, and including ourselves, when we saw Tyler McGill was lined up for the home opener, were like, that it kind of is unfortunate because we would have liked to have seen Sean Manaea, who unfortunately got hurt, or just maybe a different pitcher. But either way, I think we got a very good return here from Tyler McGill. He faced a little bit of trouble in that second inning as well, but outside of that and the sixth inning, he was just really good. And it really sucks with the sixth inning the way that went because it was back to back walks. He just started to lose the zone a little bit. And the thing that we talked about from just the stands watching his outing, he started to go to a few more pitches that he probably shouldn't have gone to just because of the fact that, a lot of what he was doing was working early on that outing and then he kind of went a little bit away from it. But still, overall, I will take getting five and a third from him, no earned run ball. Would like to limit the walks a little bit more. Four strikeouts was nice, but I mean, still overall very solid outing. And I think you're going to start to see him go deeper in games soon.
Definitely, and like what we were talking about, just because really his repertoire has changed a little bit, and really how he deploys his repertoire. And the biggest pitch that's so far led to his early season success was the slider. And I mean, the slider usage compared to last year has really gone up because I'm just looking right now at Baseball Savant, but from last year compared to this year. Last year, his slider usage was around 11%, and so far it's a small sample size, only 2 games, but he's up this slider to about 27.2%, and that's a pitch that he must have worked over in spring training in the offseason because we talked about it, or at least I brought it up before, but last year, whenever he threw a slider, it seemed like it always used to be hit hard, and it was either for either extra bases or for home runs because and then really when you take a look at the numbers, the batting average on the slider last year was 233, but the expected numbers were a bit higher. 289 expecting a batting average, a slugging at 302, an expected slugging at 373. But when you compare it to a slider being thrown this year, and again, like I stated before, small sample size, but a 0.91 batting average, an expected batting average of 202, a slugging percentage of 0.91, and an expected slugging percentage of 0.241. And not only that, but his whiff rate on his slider went up as well. Last year, his whiff rate on his slider was at 29.1, and so far to this year, 39.1. So we talked about how Tyler McGill really he does have a decent fastball. His sinker's also decent as well, but he really lacked that really dominant secondary breaking pitch. And if that slider is going to continue to be as dominant as it's been, then I mean, McGill is really going to cement this place as a very valuable start in this rotation. And we talked about it obviously with Minaya looking like he's going to miss some extra time. Montas not looking like he's going to come back till mid-July, somewhere around there. And we did have the scare with David Peterson yesterday, but
He
apparently
just had to
everything's all
take a
right.
shit.
He just had to take a dump, which
It
fine, okay.
happens.
It's better that that happened instead of him, having to go on the IL. But yeah, I mean, listen, like we said, if McGill and small sample size so far, only 2 games, but if he's going to continue this and then also work to a point where he's working deeper into games as well, because so far, I mean, he's worked in the first game in Houston, he worked 5 innings, and then Friday, the home opener against the Jays, he's worked five and a third. And this is a point also that we're going to talk about probably on this podcast. But the starting pitching, while it's been great, and so far when you take a look at it, the Mets through and again 9 games only, but the Mets have the best ERA in terms of both starting pitching and bullpen ERA. I think it's a 1.91 ERA in total through pitching. So it's just been a huge turnaround with the pitching so far. But like I said, even though the pitching has been really good, the starters really have to start working deeper into games.
Yeah, and that's not even a question, especially a guy like Tyler McGill, where again just has to find his way through that order a third time. Which I guess maybe that's why he started to change things towards the end of the outing. But it would be nice to see him actually be effective in that next time through the order. But either way, I mean, all the contact he allowed was on the ground too. Like every hard hit ball outside of I think the George Springer triple, I think all of it was on the ground, which was really nice to see as well. So again, huge progression there. And the bullpen, once again, I mean, that first game looked really good. AJ Minter, we had the scare that he maybe allowed a home run, but the umpires were just, I don't know what was up with them. Reed Garrett, we could talk about, the splitter that he threw on Alejandro Kirk. I could talk about that all day. Just to summarize how Reed Garrett is as a pitcher for this team and how much he means. And then Max Kranick giving the 2 innings, which was really nice to see as well. And Kranick looked a little, we talked about it then, that he looked a little bit shaky during that outing, but I mean, he still was able to get the job done, and that's what's unreal with this pitching staff right now is that when they're bending, they're just not breaking at all. I mean, we saw it throughout the series how the pitching definitely looked a little more vulnerable in this series, even in game two, which we'll talk about with a guy like Jose Budo. The last game we will talk about a little bit with a guy like Edwin Diaz. But again, just bending but not breaking with this pitching staff, which is really nice to see because in years past, it's like the bullpen comes in and it's an automatic that if it's a close game, the offense is going to have to step up because the bullpen's guaranteed to allow at least a couple of runs. Now it's like every time they go to the bullpen, I'm confident they're going to get outs. And especially when Reed Garrett came into that first game, it was just so refreshing to know, all right, he's going to come in. There's guys on base. It's not going to matter. He is going to leave the bases stranded because that's just what Reed Garrett does. And again, it was just really nice to see there.
Reed Garrett is a guy that's, I mean, this whole bullpen has been excellent so far, but probably the not even two, but probably the best three relievers so far this season so far has probably been Brazaban, just because he's eaten a bunch of innings and he's been really effective in those innings where he's at the eat. Craddock, because same reason, and Craddock's been put into a couple tough situations. I mean, we talked about it before in the Houston podcast, but coming in bases loaded, having to face Jordan Alvarez and Christian Walker, got out of that inning. He's eaten a couple of innings in his other appearances, and then on the last on the last game yesterday, he came into the bases loaded jam again, and he was able to get out of that jam again. And then again, we talk about Reed Garrett. And I mean, Reed Garrett, his split finger is just it's nasty. It's a disgusting pitch. And the one, because he threw that pitch to strike out Andres Jimenez, and then he threw it again to strike out Alejandro Kirk. But I mean, pretty much everyone in this bullpen, apart from Danny Young, has just been nails. And it's like you were saying, it's so nice to be just nice and relaxed whenever this bullpen comes in, because we've watched this team for years now. And back from the days of 2017 to about 2021, whenever the bullpen came in, we were just nervous, and we were crossing our fingers and clenching our butt cheeks that somehow the bullpen would just manage to hold on. But now it's like you were saying, like, the offense isn't even contributing right now to the fullest extent, and we're just kicked back and relaxed. It's like, yeah, we trust his bullpen to get through it. And I will say this though, while I do trust the bullpen right now, and I'm comfortable every time they come in, it is a little bit unfair that they're being put under this much pressure early in the season, because it's like I brought this up on the post game, that I forgot which post game we were doing from the car, but at the end of the day, these guys are human, and eventually one of these guys are going to have bad outings. And putting the bullpen in a tough situation where they almost feel like they have to be perfect every time they go out there, because the offense right now just isn't clicking right now on all cylinders. It's a little bit tough. And again, it feeds into the point where our starters have to start going deeper into games, because we talked about this last year, and a big problem of why the Mets ultimately fell to the Dodgers last year was because our bullpen by the end of the year was cooked. And we talk about, at the end of the season last year, pretty much the only circle of trust was Diaz, Stanek, and half of Reed Garrett. So while the bullpen is really good right now and it's really effective, I do not want to burn them out right now, just because it is early in the season. Although I will say the one big difference compared to last year was at points of season, at different points of the seasons, it was really only one or two guys that were reliable. We talked about it last year. Like, Reed Garrett was pretty much the only reliable reliever at the start of last year, and then it was Budo, and then it was Dednell Nunez, and we had to go to those guys constantly, and that was one of the big reasons why those guys, at different points in the season, had their arms burned out. But now that the Mets have such a deep bullpen where they could almost put anyone in any situation apart from Danny Young, that's huge. And then also, throw in the fact that, Dednell Nunez looks like he's going to be back pretty soon. A couple days ago, he pitched in AAA and put together two scoreless innings. But listen, it's huge right now that the bullpen is this effective. But you know, starters have to start going deeper into games, and the offense just has to start clicking, just to give this bullpen a little bit more rest, and just give them a little less stressful situations to come into.
Yeah, and that was the thing that we talked about mostly, just like being a little bit of a positive and a negative with this team right now is that the offense isn't clicking on all cylinders, which again, you hate to see that, but at the same time, like they're still getting wins right now despite the offense that has so much talent not clicking right now. I mean, that first inning of the game, you get off to a little bit of a hot start there. You have that double from Lindor that ended up getting overturned. Juan Soto popped out. Wish he got on base, but Pete Alonso just again continuing his excellence on the outside part of the plate, making it 2-0 with that home run. And unfortunately, though, it's just again the offense is too similar to last year, where it's just they only produce in small parts of the game. Like it's 1 or 2 innings that they produce. And once again, this game was an example of that, where in the bottom of the sixth inning, you have that walk from Lindor, the double from Soto, which drove in the run. Nimmo had a double of his own to make it 4-0. Marte had that sacrifice fly, but then the offense was just done. And I agree that, outside of just the length, it would be nice from the starters. It'd be nice for this offense to give the bullpen a comfortable lead to where there is more margin for error a little bit there. And on top of that, you could maybe utilize a guy like Danny Young where, you could go to the mop up guy when it doesn't matter and rest some of these other arms, because it's a little annoying right now that you're kind of having to use Reed Garrett every game, that you're relying on Max Kranick every other day, that you're relying on Edwin Diaz as much as you are in the early goings. So again, it would just be nice to see the offense get going a little bit. Game one, they were 2 for 7 with runners in scoring position, which again, just really infuriating. And honestly, this has been the summary of the whole season, but it was just so magnifying throughout the series too. The bottom of the order, it's just there is nothing there. You're getting decent production from the catching position right now, all things considered, with Alvarez out, but it's just there's nothing from second base. Jose Siri, I like him, but there's nothing there. Vientos, we talked about how he had better at bats, but you still need the production there from him. So I have my worries with it because they come up so much in big spots and they're just not able to get that big hit. And we saw it mostly in game three, but I just wanted to point it out because it happened a little bit in game one as well, where just wasting leadoff base runners, wasting a couple of different base runners at points. And it was just annoying.
No, 100%. And we talked about this on the post game show that we did yesterday from the car, and it's starting to finally look like that the top of the order is finally starting to put everything together. Because Francisco Lindor, he had himself a pretty good first home series. We talked about he hit the double on to open up the game on the home opener. Had again a leadoff double in the second game, and I think he got on base a couple times yesterday too, if I'm not mistaken. But he's starting to finally look like he's starting to heat up a little bit. He's not having that that huge slump that he had at the beginning of last year. It looked like the first two series he was on that same trajectory again, but I guess it was just a home crowd that just got behind him, and he started to wake up, which is just nice. Um, Pete Alonso, of course, we talked about how he's just had a lot of amazing at bats throughout the season so far. He's had a lot of clutch home runs. We talked about the one in Miami in the final game, which helped tie up the game and eventually helped lead the Mets to the win. And then he hit the 2-run home run on the home opener in the first inning on Friday, and then again had another big RB had a big RBI single in the finale of this series to put the Mets up 1-0 in that game. But we talk about Juan Soto, and listen, Juan Soto right now, he's not clicking on all cylinders, but let me tell you, people are freaking out saying, oh, like Juan Soto, this, where's all the production? Well, I'm telling you right now, Juan Soto, this is a guy apparently right now that's not clicking on all cylinders, and so far through the start of the season, he's hitting 250, 385 on base percentage, 438 slugging, and an 823 OPS. If a struggling Juan Soto is having an 823 OPS, I mean, I'm so excited to see what he's looking like when he's clicking on all cylinders. Because I mean, I get it. We hold him to such a high standard, and again, because he's making $51 million and he's the best player on our team. But and for me, Soto's not really struggling right now. He's just not at that point where he's just clicking on all cylinders. He's having a lot of good at bats. He's drawing walks. He's drove in a couple runners so far. He's had a couple, big time singles. And again, it's like I mentioned before, but every time Soto's up at bat, it's just like it's so fun to watch because he's constantly working the counts. He's not swinging at bad pitches. Apart from the bad pitch that he swung out of the zone from Josh Hader, he really hasn't had any really bad chases apart from that one. But I mean, yeah, like if Juan Soto is struggling with an 823 OPS, and I'm just really excited to see what he's going to look like when he's finally clicking on all cylinders. And it's like you were saying yesterday, when that first home run at Citi Field eventually happens, it just feels like that Soto's just going to go on a huge tear.
Yeah, and hopefully I end up being right about that because again, like you said, he's not clicking on all cylinders, but he's still just putting up good numbers. And we'll talk about game 2 now a little bit because he did have a hit in that game as well. But again, there were a couple of big spots where you maybe would have liked for him to step up a little bit, especially that first inning where they had the leadoff double yet again from Lindor. But just to first talk about the pitching in that game because this was a very frustrating game. I would say this was the most frustrating of the 3 in the series. Griffin Canning, again, like we're kind of having the same conversations with every starting pitcher right now where what they gave isn't terrible. It's just you want the length. You really want the length. He allowed 3 walks. The thing that really sucked with Canning's outing is he had to work through like a lot of his at bats or a lot of the batters he faced rather were putting up very good fights against him. Like there were some 10 pitch at bats, there was some 6, 7 pitch at bats, and it just drove that pitch count up to where they didn't have a choice but to pull him because when you look at the stat line, you see the 6 strikeouts, 1 earned run, 4 hits. You're probably thinking, why did they pull him after 4? And then you look at the pitch count and you realize, yeah, he had to face a lot of adversity. I didn't love where he was putting his slider at points throughout this game, if I'm being honest with you, but he still generated a lot of swing and miss stuff with it. And overall turned in like a respectable outing. Jose Budo showed really the first crack of armor from this Mets bullpen outside of Danny Young, allowing a run, which is why you said after game 1, by the way, when you said you forgot which episode you said the bullpen needs to be perfect. That was after the first game of the series because I remember when Budo allowed that run, it's like, well, here's where they're not showing that they're perfect. And then Brazaban comes in. We love us some Brazzers. He gave 2 in a third innings, was good in it. Edwin Diaz gave us a little bit of a heart attack, but I mean, he still had 3 strikeouts. It was still really good. The velo got up a little bit that outing too. So it was nice to see the pitching again, bending but not breaking, like I put it earlier.
Yeah, and I thought it's weird with Canning because he's been really good so far, but I agree with you. His slider location was a little bit iffy because there was some points in that game where he was placing it just perfectly on the corner, generating a lot of swings and misses, and there was some points where he was just kind of missing with it. But really, the slider, like we talked about with McGill, the slider has been the big pitch with Canning because we talked about it. When the Mets ultimately signed him, like the big change that Canning really had to make to his repertoire was cut back on that fastball and really use more of the breaking stuff. And so far he's done that because when you compare the usage to last year, I mean 37.3% four seamer use last year on the fastball. Cut that down to about 30.7% so far. And then the huge one was the slider because last year he only used the slider about 24.1%. And so far, through the first 2 games where he's pitched, that pitch usage is all the way up at 44.3%, and it's been his best pitch because he was using it a ton of it in his first outing against Houston, and then he again was using it a lot in the last start against the Blue Jays. And I mean, like we were saying, it was an iffy pitch, but it's like I just said also, and you said he was generating a ton of swings and misses because he used that pitch about 37%, and he did generate 19 swings and 6 whiffs on that. So really, his slider is his best pitch so far. But I do agree with you. The one thing that definitely hurt him because it's not like he got into a ton of trouble in his outing, but the 2 at bats that really killed him was Alan Roden in the second inning, where he just constantly was working on him and fouling a pitch, and that was a 9 pitch at bat. And then in the 4th inning, it was the Will Wagner at bat, where again, you know, Canning was throwing a lot of sliders, throwing, his fastball, throwing his changeup, but Wagner was just staying at the at bat, taking close pitches, fouling pitch after pitch, and he had a 10 pitch at bat in that. So it was really those two at bats that really did hurt him. But and we talked, I forgot which podcast we brought it up, but I think ideally when everything falls into place and starters start to come back like Maya Montas, I still think Canning's best situation and the best usage of him is going to be out of that bullpen, because I think the one thing that really hurts him when he's in the starting rotation and he's getting into deep counts and he's not being able to put hitters away. The one thing that really hurts him is that he just doesn't have that overpowering fastball. And when you're getting into those counts where the opposing hitters are, taking close pitches and, fouling your breaking stuff off time after time after time. It's really important that a pitcher like that has that, reliable fastball where he can just crank back on it and just and unload and, blow it blow it by the opposing hitters. But, with Griffin Canning, a guy who only averages about 93, 94 mile an hour on his fastball, you really can't do that. And really that's the one thing that holds him back. And I still think that, when pitchers start to come back like Minaya Montas, I think when you move Canning to the bullpen, I think he's going to be an effective arm out of that pen.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we talked about it a lot too, that a lot of the tools are just better fit out of the bullpen with a guy like Canning to for the lower leverage part of the order. Like, this is kind of like the Phil Maton of the world where, you just don't want him in there against the top part of the order if he's gonna come in for that. And even in this game too, like when Rhoda got that single in the 5th, I thought right then and there they should have they should have pulled the hook on him. Like, I get wanting to try to get one more batter, especially because um I'm not even sure. I actually want to go through just the fact check. Yeah, because he got Boba Shed out twice, but it's similar to the conversation that we had. Um, what was it? The Houston series with Jordan.
Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, where even though I think it was Canning in that scenario too. Yeah, it was Canning actually in that scenario
Yeah.
where even though he got Jordan out twice, you don't test your luck a third time there. And again, it didn't really matter in retrospect just because Udo comes in and allows that single anyway, which did score the run. Maybe they go without allowing a run that inning, but again, either way they won, so it doesn't really matter in general in the grand scheme of things. But it's that's really the problem here is that I don't know if you're ever going to get Canning through the order a third time, and if he can't get through the order a third time, then I'm sorry, but I just don't think he could be in this rotation long term when everyone is healthy, and he's probably going to find himself being the odd man out because of it. Because Tyler Miguel at least is giving you a little bit of length and showing you at least some ability to maybe face the order a third time. Peterson was in this rotation all of last year. He's not going anywhere. Senga's not moving anywhere. Holmes, they're going to try to make this thing work. He's not going anywhere. So it's kind of like Griffin Canning right now, at least. And again, this isn't saying he had a bad outing in that game. And even the one in Houston, like, again, there were good outings for what you want from Griffin Canning. It's just that when you look at what he's providing this team right now, it's just not enough length. And I don't know where you're going to get that ever from him. So I'm just sitting here thinking, at least on April 7th, that he's gonna have to show in the next few outings that he could get through the order a third time. Otherwise, I think he's gonna find himself being the odd man out in this scenario.
100%. But it's also like, I mean, like we talk about it like as a concern where, Canning really just can't get through the third part of the order. But it's really kind of also a positive because it's just showing the depth of this pitching staff because, Canning was looking originally like he was going to be a bullpen arm. And then obviously, all the injuries happen in spring training. He's being thrown into the rotation. And, even though, the length hasn't been there from him, he's really put in, solid outings. He's only given up because in that first game against Houston, let me check how many runs he gave up. Give me one second.
I
Yeah,
think it
he
was
only he only
two.
gave up 2 runs in that Houston start, and then he only gave up 1 run in the Blue Jay start. So even though he's not going deep into the games right now, and he's gonna have to show that if he wants to stay in this rotation. But it's just like what I just brought up. The point that, the Mets had all these injuries and they just had to throw Canning in there, and the fact that, he's producing well right now and pitching well and not putting, much stress on the rest of the rotation, it's a good sign just to show that, that this pitching staff as a whole just has so much depth right now. And, the fact that, like I just said, the fact that you can throw in a guy like Griffin Canning in there and, he just goes out there, he shoves and produces. I mean, that's just a good sign and a testament to how well David Stearns built this whole pitching staff.
Yeah, and then to shift to the offense in that game, kind of similar. This was the most frustrating the offense was though of this entire series because 2 for 13 with runners in scoring position. A leadoff double in that first inning, they don't capitalize. A leadoff double in the second inning, they don't capitalize. Brett Beatty putting together one of the worst at bats I've ever seen in my freaking life. Which that might be hyperbole, but still, the bottom of the fourth inning, it was 2 outs, but you get the triple from Jesse Winker, Mark Vientos. Maybe it's your time to come through. Puts together a competitive at bat, but just swings at the ugliest pitch imaginable on that cutter there on the outside part of the plate. And it just looked like this offense was going to give nothing. I mean, they go down in order the next few innings. They get that 2 out rally in the seventh inning. And I felt being in the ballpark there, I'm like, okay, if they don't capitalize here, I don't know if they're going to win this game because it was 2 outs, but they get the bases loaded. And Vientos, Beatty, and Siri all put together good enough at bats. You get 2 singles there. And the bottom of the order finally giving you something. Siri, they pitched around him because they saw Hayden Senger on deck. So they're like, all right, well, what's the point of pitching the Siri when he could do damage if he gets a hold of one when we could get Senger? I love what Mendoza did and waited to put Marte on deck, but Starling Marte, one of the most expensive, you know, bench pieces in the league. No surprise there. He ends up grounding out, putting together also a pretty garbage at bat. And at that point, I thought they were going to lose the game. I was like, you can't score at the bases loaded in the bottom of the order are the ones that, coming through potentially there. You just need to turn it over to the top, and they couldn't. I thought, no way in hell. But then Lindor gets that walk, Soto gets a single. Then when Alonso and Nimmo went down and out, I was like, they're fucking this up again, aren't they? Like that was just the expectation. It was similar to last year. And Jesse Winker lefty on lefty. I hated the matchup. And every single person, you could feel it in the stadium. I'm sure at home it was the same feeling. When he struck up or swung on that third pitch and missed badly, I think everyone had this feeling of, yeah, this is done and over with, this rally. But then he gets that big triple that would have been a home run in 10 ballparks. Of course, Yankee Stadium would have been a home run in. Vientos ended up striking out there. The bottom of the ninth, again, putting together a rally. It got scary. I loved the fans, though. Counting down the pitch clock there on Sandlin, that was absolutely electric because, again, this crowd was kind of like a playoff atmosphere. And credit to Luis Torrens, by the way, which despite dealing with an injury, comes into this game late and ends up getting that big single. And then Lindor just has to get that sacrifice fly and the Mets win it. So again, not the ideal offensive performance, but they still got the win.
Yeah, there definitely was that little scare with Luis Torrens, and I mean, it was an arm contusion. I don't know, how much pain he's in right now. I mean, it can't be that much pain considering that he came in to that game he came in to catch when Marte came in to pinch hit for Hayden Sanger. Then he eventually stayed in the game and then got that big base hit later on in the game. But yeah, and then obviously he didn't start yesterday's game. Sanger did start. I wonder if we're gonna see him tonight though. But I mean, it doesn't sound too concerning considering that they haven't put him on the IL at all. So I would assume that it's not really nothing. They just wanted to give him a couple days rest. But I mean, yes, same with you. When they start to put together that rally in the bottom of the eighth, and obviously Lindor had that really good four pitch walk where Little just didn't throw anything close to the zone. Then Soto pokes a single through the middle, and then yeah, you talk about Pete Alonso, who probably his worst game of the season so far. He just I think he swung out and missed on a knuckle curve. And then, and then Brandon Nimmo comes up. He hits a ball deep into center field. I thought he maybe got a hold of one, but probably if it was a warmer day and it wasn't raining, maybe it does get over the head of the center fielder or possibly does go out. But at that point, I agree with you. I was like, damn, they're really going to mess this up again. And then you mentioned Jesse Winker comes up and who by the way already had a big time game where he doubled earlier and then had a triple also. But he comes up lefty on lefty matchup against Little. And I think the interesting point was because Evan, because I was watching Evan Roberts' Rico Brony podcast yesterday when he was breaking down the series, and he pointed this out. He pointed this out as well, and I didn't even realize it, but yesterday because Little was also in that game, and Mendy did make the move to pinch hit Marte for Winker. So, but because Marte had already pinched hit an inning prior for Hayden Sanger, that was the only reason why Winker um, stayed in the game and faced up lefty lefty against Little. So, I mean, it was a good move because probably if Marte comes into that situation again, he probably doesn't come through big time. But it
Definitely not.
doesn't matter, and I agree with you. When Winker swung on that 1-2 on that 1-1 knuckle curve, and he swung at it low, I again thought the same thing. Here we go again. We're gonna mess this up. But credit to Jesse Winker, he stayed in that at bat and hit a triple. And yeah, originally I brought it up on the post game when we did for game two, but I thought he got a hold of that one, but it just stayed in. Obviously, Springer came out with an injury, but he was fine because he ended up pinch running in that third game of this in the series. But yeah, just all game the Mets were looking for that big hit, and Jesse Winker, the unsung hero, one of the little under the radar pickups that the Mets brought back this offseason. And he came through big. And then yeah, I mean, top of the ninth, Diaz comes in, a little bit of a scary situation. He was able to get through that inning, and then yeah, bottom of the ninth, the Mets put together some good at bats. Jose Siri obviously walked. He was able to get to second base on that wild pitch. Luis Torrens, like I mentioned, who has come up big time after time again this season. He hits a little blooper into left field. Good thing that the third base coach held up Jose Siri, because originally I was thinking, are they going to send them? But the ball just wasn't hit deep enough, so it was a good idea to hold him. And then obviously, Francisco Lindor, obviously after Jeff Hoffman comes in to replace Sandin, he gets a first pitch and hits into center field. And I mean not Luis Torrens, Jose Siri comes in to walk off the game. So definitely the most stressful game of the season. Not the most stressful game of the season so far. That was the Miami game, but the most stressful game of the series. But the Mets were able to just hold on and find a way to win that game. And it reminded me a lot of a game last year where the offense for the majority of the game just couldn't find that big hit. Obviously, they get that big hit late in the game from Jesse Winker, and then they find a way to walk it off later in the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah, and I agree with Brian's comment that I thought that with the way that looked off the bat, that was for sure going. And I was talking about this with Steven when I was in the car with him on the way home. I was like, if Winker did hit that out, I don't know how many times it has happened that a player was a single short of the cycle, because I feel like because that would have put him at that spot where he was just a
Yeah.
single short. I was like, I wonder how much that's ever happened in baseball where a guy's short by a single. So that would have been cool to see if Winker was able to hit for the cycle there, but unfortunately he couldn't. That one couldn't get out. Like you said, though, if it was a warmer day, probably would have. The thing that's really infuriating, though, just back to a general standpoint with his offense, is that Bassett was tossing
Yeah.
meatballs. Like that's what was really annoying, and we saw the same thing with Francis in that last game. But when I looked at the looked at the scoreboard, and I saw that he was not even touching 70 at points with his curveball, I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we actually doing here that they can't tee off Chris Bassett? But for whatever reason, they just can't. And I guess it's the variety of pitches. I mean, he threw an absurd amount of different pitches in that outing. But either way, fast forward to game three. Again, kind of more of the same with this offense yet again. The first inning, you have that leadoff single from Lindor. Soto hits into that double play. Alonso gets hit by a pitch. You think maybe they don't get the big hit there. Second inning, Vientos had a single. Again, couldn't get the big hit. Third inning, at least finally the offense got going a little bit. Can you take over? I need a second here. I'm like choking here.
Yeah, well, you're at the second inning.
The third inning.
Oh, third inning, sorry. So yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, this was the inning that that finally the Mets were able to get going. Hayden Sanger draws a walk, and by the way, credit to Hayden Sanger because he had a really under the radar game in that final game of the series, and he's putting up better at bats than Brett Beatty, even though that's pretty much a low bar at this point. But I mean, he walked, Lindor struck out, Juan Soto then again with another walk, and then Pete Alonso, who again we talked about it, has been big this season so far. And considering he just came off of his probably his worst game of the season, comes through with the RBI single to put the Mets up 1-0, and then Brandon Nimmo comes up at the rim, hits a sac fly. Jesse Winker then strikes out the end the inning, and then obviously, um, bottom of the fourth, a quick 1-2-3 inning, and really like what Evan brought up before, where the Mets going to hit Chris Bassett again, a soft tossing pitcher. Well, Bowden Francis, because I mean, and I brought up the point yesterday. I was like, okay, here's the one inning where the Mets score runs, so we're pretty much going to be quiet for the rest of the game. And I mean, that pretty much happened because then a 1-2-3 inning in the fourth, Vientos strikes out, Beatty flies out, Siri flies out, and then bottom of the fifth again. Sanger leads off with a single. Lindor grounds into a double play. Soto lines out, and then the bottom of the sixth, probably the one of the most infuriating innings because Pete Alonso starts off that inning with a leadoff single, followed by another single by Nimmo. Winker strikes out, and then Vientos then walks, and then Brett Beatty, and this at bat pissed me off because after well, yeah, okay. It was after the Winker at bat where he struck out because they bring in Chad Green to replace Bowden Francis. He walks Vientos, and then Brett Beatty on the second pitch of that at bat gets a meatball from Chad Green, 94-mile-an-hour right down the middle, swing and a miss, and then takes ball three, fouls off the fourth pitch, and then strikes out swinging on a fastball behind the zone. I mean, we
He
really
got
don't have
booed.
to talk about much about Brett Beatty because he's just I mean, he's playing his way out of not even playing his way out of the Mets right now. He's playing his way out of the league probably because every time, and I know I believe it was James Shiana brought it up, but I think majority of his at bats so far this
9 of
season,
his 21, that was
yeah,
the stat. He falls behind 0-2 in the count. He got booed after this at bat too.
yeah, and it's just, and I brought this up to Evan yesterday, but pitching to Brett Beatty is so easy because pretty much all you have to do is throw anything close to the zone. He's either gonna whiff over it, just take the pitch, or it's gonna be a little dribbler into the ground, or a soft fly into the air, and then pretty much after you got him 0-2, you could just throw anything in the dirt or just throw something right down the middle because this guy just has no plate approach. But let's move on from Brett Beatty, and then Siri flies out, and then pretty much after that, the offense just didn't get pretty much anything, and then it was the bullpen that had to come in and just get get the Mets to the end there to finish off the game for the win.
Yeah. It's just like, again, frustrating because you thought they were probably gonna lose this game. It felt similar to the last game against the Marlins, where it's like probably didn't deserve the win, but you're not going to complain that they did. David Peterson's start was weird. I mean, he had the 5 walks, almost shit himself on the mound, 3 strikeouts in the outing, but he got those results. He got those ground balls at points, so much so that he tried to he got one himself on the first batter, I think. So much so that he tried to deflect one to the great Brett Beatty at second base. But either way, yeah, just again a weird outing from him. It sucks because I wish they got length. And even this game, I was trying to figure out, why Mendoza was so quick with the hook on Tyler McGill in the first game, but the same thing wasn't applied with Griffin Canning, and even more so in this game with David Peterson, because once David Peterson walked Santander after he was about to puke on the mound and he wasn't even close to the zone, I don't understand why he was in the game at that point. And then he ended up hitting Jimenez and they finally pulled him. But I thought they should have pulled him right after he walked Santander at the very least, because he wasn't even close to the strike zone at all. But I get it. They wanted to try to get a little bit more from Peterson, wanted to get him to finish the inning. But it just unfortunately they couldn't get that. The bullpen once again just nails AJ Minter. Shout out to Big Boom AJ. He had, I think, his best outing as a Met thus far. The 2 strikeouts, his velo was up. He was generating swing and miss stuff, and it was nice to see him looking like an $11 million reliever, like he's being paid to be.
You know, it definitely sucks that they couldn't get the length from David Peterson. I thought it was a weird start from Peterson, like you said, because he was getting the results as always. He was getting that soft contact in the infield and those weak little flyouts, but he was kind of a little bit all over the place, and I mean, it was kind of your typical David Peterson start because he ended up with the final line of, let me just pull it up right here. But yeah, 4 and 2/3, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 5 walks, which you don't love to see, and then 3 strikeouts. And it would have been nice to see if he could have replicated what he did in Miami, where he did put up 9 strikeouts. But I mean, that's just really not David Pearson's way. You know, he loves his results, he loves his ground balls, he loves his weak little flyouts. But yeah, I agree with you. I didn't understand why Mendy was so he was so quick to pull McGill when he probably looked the best out of all 3 pitchers of him, Canning, and Peterson. And then on top of that, you know, like I understand that Peterson probably himself wanted to finish the outing, but when you could tell that the guy was just not feeling well, and like we said originally, we thought that it was going to be an injury. We thought that he was just injured and he was hurt, but the fact, you know, that he wasn't feeling well, and then I mean, he walked Vlad in that situation, then he walked Santander, and really there he should have got the pole, but then you know, they tried to leave him in because lefty for Jimenez, and then you know he hits him on the first pitch. They pulled him out, and then thankfully Kranick, who you know we continue to talk about, has just been a dog. He gets out of a bases loaded jam, um, pitches the 6th inning, a quick 1-2-3 inning from him, and he looked a lot sharper than he did in his first outing. His fastball definitely did look a lot better, and he was hitting more of it in the zone. But then yeah, and then obviously, you know, Reed Garrett comes in again, who's been big, 1-2-3 inning from him. And then top of the 8th, as you said, AJ Minter comes in. He was able to get the booms, strikes out Santander, strikes out Andres Jimenez, gives up the single to Alejandro Kirk, but then, you know, really just bends but didn't break. He was able to get Clement to strike out. I mean, sorry, he was able to get Clement to line out to Juan Soto in right field. But yeah, and the one thing from Minter, I mean, his four seam, his cutter, his changeup, all looked really good in that outing. Got 5 swings, 2 whiffs on his four seamer. Got 3 swings and 1 whiff on his cutter. So, I mean, yeah, like as you mentioned, you know, he looked a little bit shaky in his first 2 outings, AJ Minter, but really that last outing, he's really looked like the $11 million lefty that the Mets have got out of the pen, and they need AJ Minter because pretty much, I mean, I understand Danny Young's there, but pretty much AJ Minter is the only reliable lefty in that pen. So it's nice to see that he's starting to look like, you know, the guy that we saw in Atlanta. And then yeah, obviously Edwin Diaz comes in to finish that game off, and of course in typical Edwin Diaz fashion, he's got to make a sweat. Hits Alan Roden on the first pitch, then strikes out Heineman, gets Nathan Lukes to fly out to left field, and then you know Bobachek comes up, and I'm like, just get Bobachek out here. Don't let Vladimir Guerrero Jr. come up here because, especially like you brought up, at that point, Vladdy Jr. had to hit a home run, and you know we're pretty much all thinking to ourselves, you know, this is probably the point where he's going to hit his first home run if he does come up. Diaz hits Bichette, but thankfully was able to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to ground out to Lindor, who tossed it over to Luis Acuna to record the final out. So yeah, typical Diaz fashion. He was able. I mean, he was able to get it. He was able to finish off the game, but stressful. But I'll say this. So the one positive thing about Diaz was, you know, because there was a little bit of that concern in spring training where his velo was a little bit down. His velo did start to return in the 2 games he pitched the series, because I think in that first game he was able to get his fastball to around 97, 98, and then the final game yesterday he was able to get it to around 97 mile per hour. So good thing that Diaz's velos look like it's starting to finally come back.
Yeah, which we saw Carson at the game, and I know he probably covered his eyes when Diaz hit those 2 batters, but I get this point. I'm not disagreeing that McGill should have been pulled then and there, but when you have a guy in David Peterson like borderline puking on the mound, and he's not even coming close to the strike zone, I feel like right then and there they just had to pull him. Like it's more just about that than again just what David Peterson usually does versus what Tyler McGill does. So I'm not disagreeing with that point, but when you see him borderline barfing, I just felt you had to pull him there. And this is also a good point. The pitching staff, putting up these type of numbers better than the Dodgers right now, which it's early, but Blake Snell got injured. I thought only the Mets have pitchers get injured, but this is why you don't invest a lot in starting pitching. It's exactly why. And I wish we got some of the length from the starting pitching, but I mean, the Dodgers aren't particularly getting that right now from guys like Sasaki and even Yamamoto. I don't think it's gone too deep in the games, if I'm not mistaken there. But either way, yeah, it's just that's why you don't pay starting pitching, and then the offense is starting to show flashes of clicking. They just really need to get it going. That's the thing. They need to just start getting like the big hits now and then when there's actually traffics on the base paths. They need to come through with the hit. That's really what it comes down to, because the at bats aren't terrible. It's just more so that.
Yeah, definitely, and the fact that we talked about it where they need to stop doing this kind of tradition where and we saw last year where they only get where they score runs in bunches where it's only about like 1 or 2 innings and then the rest of the innings they basically do nothing and then also the fact I mean like the at bats weren't terrible this series but I think the thing like we mentioned like with both Bassett and Francis and this also works with Kevin Gausman in the first start as well because we brought it up, but in that first start, the Mets in that first inning, they really got the Gausman, and he finished that first inning with 30 pitches, and then but pretty much after that, it was a lot of weak contact, not a lot of strikeouts either. They really weren't making and forcing Gausman to work deep at the counts, and he was able to get five and a third out of that game. So really the at bats like even when they don't score in those innings they really need to start putting more competitive at bats where they're making opposing pitchers work because like Gosman, Bassett, and Francis, they're both really good individual pitchers on their own right. But when you start seeing the better pitchers around the league, like you really got to start making them work because it's going to get to a point where it's like the Mets are going to face Paul Skeens, and then they might be in a situation where Skeens is about to throw a complete game shutout because the Mets just couldn't make him work and get to a weaker bullpen. But I mean, like we were saying before, it's going to come in time. The top of the order, like we mentioned, it's starting to finally click with guys like Lindor, with Soto. We mentioned Pete before, with Nimmo as well. Obviously, Vientos has to find his footing. He did have a bit more better of a series, in this one against the Blue Jays. But like we brought up on our post games from the car, it's really the bottom of the order that's killing them because the top guys are getting on base, but it just seems like every time there's runners in scoring position, it's the bottom of the order that comes up. And when you have black holes down there, with Jose Siri, Tyrone Taylor, Brett Beatty, guys like that, it's like they're pretty much automatic outs. And I mean, this isn't to like give disrespect either to guys like Luis Torrens and Sanger who've actually put up decent at bats for their small sample time. But pretty much, I mean, listen, the bottom of the order is going to start to get some reinforcements, as we mentioned. Like Alvarez should be back fairly soon. I know we don't love Jeff McNeil, but he's going to come in and he's going to replace Brett Beatty. And at that point, McNeil, while he's not the 2022 Jeff McNeil, he's a league average bat at this point, and anything's better than Brett Beatty. So I mean, once the reinforcements start to come back, and then once like you said, like the top of the order, because while they're starting to finally click, they're nowhere near firing all cylinders yet. So, and like we were saying, once the offense starts to finally, be that real threat that we talked about before the season started, and then you combine that with the strength so far of the pitching staff, this is going to be a dangerous team.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting about it is just that again, the offense still has so much that they could provide. The offense has also got insanely lucky when they put the ball in play. They are the third most unlucky team on balls in play so far. Whatever happens, happens. Yeah, the
Great word,
Chavez pixie dust isn't working early
Chavez.
on, unfortunately. But yeah, they have a series coming up against the Marlins. A Another 3-game set for the homestand here. We will be in attendance for 2 of the games, so you'll get a drive home version on Tuesday, and then Wednesday. I don't know where you're gonna get the post game from because we're hitting up the doubleheader. Fortunate, but also unfortunate that we got invited with free tickets to the Ranger game, so we have a doubleheader there to hit up on Wednesday. All I ask is beat the ever living piss out of this team. They just won 2 out of 3 against them, not even playing great baseball. please beat them. You're not facing Sandy. Just I'm gonna put my prediction. I'm gonna say they sweep them. I hate calling sweeps, but I'm also just trying to manifest it because please just don't lose to this team at all. Please actually hit off Connor Gillespie this time. Uh, and I think who are they facing game three? Max Meyer. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
who they're
Max
facing.
Meyer.
It's another pitcher that you should just absolutely be beating the ever living piss out of. So all I ask is at minimum 2 out of 3.
Yeah, this is definitely the type of series where I brought it up before where, the offense, this is finally their opportunity to fully break out at once. And it would be nice to give the bullpen a little bit of rest here and just, tee off on this Marlins pitching staff because like you said, they're not facing Sandy this series. And by the way, congratulations to him and his wife because he's going on the paternity list because they're expecting a child. So congratulations to
Congrats on the
both of them.
sex, Sandy.
Yeah,
Future
congrats on the
Met.
sex, Sandy, future Met as well. But yeah, I mean, this is like you were saying, like, I want to sweep, and I'm gonna predict a sweep. I won't be pissed off that they go 2 out of 3 just because they just swept the Blue Jays, but please just sweep the Marlins as well. Like a 6-game winning streak at home and a 7-game win streak as whole to go into the West Coast trip. It will be really nice. But I mean, yeah, we don't know who's going to be the Marlins pitcher so far in the first game, but obviously Sang on the mound. Then the second game, Connor Gillespie versus Clay Holmes, and then the final game of the series, Max Meyer versus Tyler McGill. And I think for Kodai Senga, he's still gonna be on the pitch count. I don't know whether if they're gonna raise it or it's gonna stay the same around 75, 80 mile. If it's gonna be just the 75 and to the 80 pitch limit, it probably will be. But I think the one thing for Kodai Senga, just yeah, don't be throwing fastballs down the middle on the first 2 batters of the game today because we don't want to be down 2-0 early to the Marlins like we were in that last game of the series. But I mean, the big thing for Sanga, if he could just give around like 5 innings, 6 innings, and just provide swings and misses on his forkball, that's really the one thing that I'm looking for. And then obviously, the second game, hopefully Clay Holmes can work deeper into his third start as well. Hopefully, we start to see more of the repertoire like we did in the second game. And then for a guy like Tyler McGill, just continue to go out and do what he's doing. And then if he could provide some more length also, that would be nice. But yeah, like I brought up before, this is definitely the series where the offense should be going off and should just be teeing off on this weak pitching staff. And like we said, give the bullpen some much needed relief.
Yeah. And then, the last thing that I want to touch on is I see Matt Allen, who is finally returning to pro baseball after all the injuries, still touching the high 90s and looking very effective. It's low A ball, so we'll see how he progresses. But it's nice to see that, even after all of this, he might find his way back, into like the conversation of being a legit piece for this team at one point. I don't know, how big of a piece, obviously, but just being a piece in general, which would be just great for him considering all the adversity he's had to battle through. But I think that's really all we have to talk about this episode. It was great to see them sweep a series at home, and I just hope they could do the same here. Sweep the entire homestand. Why not?
Yeah, definitely sweep the entire homestand. Keep on pace right now with the Phillies because they're pretty much almost winning every game they're playing. Also, the Dodgers couldn't help us out in that series, but it is what it is. It's early, but yeah, just keep racking up these early wins, and then obviously we'll keep doing our post games after each game. We'll give the podcast for the series wrap up on Thursday when the series ends, and that's also an off day, so perfect time to do that. And then this team heads out to the West Coast where they play the Twins and the Sacramento A's. So it's gonna be nice to see. It's gonna be nice to see them play in a minor league ballpark. Maybe the offense could start to tee off and start hitting home runs in a smaller ballpark with smaller dimensions. But I mean, yeah, that's pretty much gonna wrap it up. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. And like you're saying, keep liking, subscribing, also sharing, and then yeah, we'll see you guys next time for the next post game and then the next podcast on Thursday. See you guys.
Let's go, Mets.